Mr. Stewart is a 60-year-old male who is status post right CVA. Mr. Stewart is just beginning physical therapy, and after an initial subject evaluation, a gait analysis is being performed. What you see here is the actual gait analysis broken down into each phase. A description of what one should see in typical gait is followed by an explanation of what atypical behaviors Mr. Stewart is demonstrating with his gait. To begin with, Mr. Stewart exhibits a foot-flat position where there should be heel strike during initial contact. This could be due to weak dorsiflexors, lack of eccentric control, and weak hip flexors in his left lower extremity. During loading response, the knee is extended. The lack of hip and knee flexion prevents the limb from adequately accepting body weight during this phase, and increased weight is put on the assistive device. The trunk is flexed forward, moving the center of mass more anteriorly on the base of support. During mid-stance, the knee also goes into genu recurvatum due to quadricep weakness, and Mr. Stewart's center of mass continues to be forced forward. Very tight, almost spastic plantar flexors create a rapid toe-off during terminal stance. Overall weakness in the left lower extremity creates a shorter step length of the non-affected right lower extremity in order to compensate and decrease the amount of weight the affected limb actually has to accept during this phase. The shorter step length does not allow for hip extension. Therefore, it does not encourage the hip flexors to fire into explosive flexion and begin the swing phase. As the affected limb begins the swing phase, the weak dorsiflexors cause the left lower extremity to externally rotate and the toes to begin to drag the ground. During mid-swing, the toes continue to drag with external rotation, and the unaffected limb attempts to compensate for this gait deviation by performing right lateral lean to allow for a vaulting action while plantar flexing and extending the knee. During terminal swing, the toes finally stop dragging and the vaulting action of the unaffected limb stops as the affected side makes initial contact with a flat foot. The center of mass is thrown forward in front of its normal position. Heel strike is once again absent due to weak dorsiflexors. To improve independence with gait by decreasing toe drag and circumduction and vaulting, Mr. Auberly deemed dorsiflexor weakness as an essential target for treatment. Mr. Auberly begins by asking Mr. Stewart to actively perform both a concentric and an eccentric contraction of the left ankle dorsiflexor. Mr. Stewart is unable to perform either contraction due to weakness. The therapist then places the left ankle in a dorsiflex position. Mr. Auberly begins aggressively tapping on the dorsiflexor's muscle belly to facilitate the muscle to fire. The patient is then instructed to perform an eccentric contraction by slowly lowering the foot. Mr. Auberly then progressed the treatment session by implementing the use of NMES to the left anterior tibialis. An electrode is placed proximally at the origin and more distally at the muscle belly. The NMES is turned up until the machine begins to facilitate a muscle contraction. The patient is then instructed to actively contract the foot into dorsiflexion once the machine initiates the movement. Mr. Auberly will give Mr. Stewart a visual target by placing his hand at or near the end range of dorsiflexion he wishes the patient to achieve. The machine is placed on an intermittent cycle that initiates a contraction followed by a period of rest. Both of these techniques can be used to initially facilitate a muscle contraction to help build strength. However, the idea is that the patient will eventually build enough strength to actively perform a contraction without the assistance of any form of external stimulation. One study by Sabut et al. Showed that after 12 weeks of NMES administration, dorsiflexor strength increased by 56.6% as compared to 27.7% in the control group.